A very good morning to you. Welcome to this morning on Asakhe, Thursday edition of this morning on Asakhe. Good morning. How are you, ma'am?
Good morning, Brighton. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm very well. It's quite wet in Bulawayo. It's promising to rain. It was raining in Zulu. And then did you go to watch cricket, Zulu?
I didn't.
The boys are playing very well. Yeah, and unfortunately, we lost that match. But they're playing very well. It's promising.
Well, at least something good is going on in our country.
Right, so we have a jam-packed show for you guys this morning. I'm going to be looking at the Delimitation report court case with Professor Love Mamaduku, and also going to give you the news headlines this morning. Our journalist Tanaka is going to be giving us the news headlines this morning. Tanaka, good morning. Welcome to this morning on Asakhe.
Good morning, Brighton. Good morning, Precious. And good morning to everyone who is tuned into the space this morning. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of the stories that we carried out on our website yesterday. So the first story is one which ran under the headline, "A survey predicts Chamisa win in 2023 elections." So this is a very interesting story. So and a new opinion poll has shown that a section of voters favor CCC leader over President Emerson. So closers said the result indicated that they would cast their ballot while 12% were fairly uncertain. So according to the poll, it stated that Chamisa would win the elections by 53%. And Mnangagwa would get 40%, while the remaining 7% would go to other political parties. So this poll, it was by the Brain Thirst Foundation, which was conducted on their behalf by SEBI Strategy. And it stated that Chamisa would be ahead of President Mnangagwa by 18%. And the second story that we had on our website is one which ran under the headline, "CCC must institutionalize voter registration in its campaign." So this is a story that came from a conversation that we're having here on our Twitter space yesterday, where we were talking to Hopel Chinono, and he was actually emphasizing that Nelson Chamisa is quite charismatic, and he's a very popular politician amongst young people in our country. And if he wants to win this election, then he really needs to intensify their voter registration campaign. So he says that in as much as he has been talking about them mentioning this at their rallies and all, it's not actually an official registration campaign. So they really need to work on that so that at least they can get as many young people to register to vote as they can. And then the last story that we had is one which speaks to the needs of people with disabilities, and it ran under the headline, "Government must make it mandatory for teachers to learn Braille." So this story came from an event that was held yesterday in Bulawayo at Silas. So it was a belated commemoration of World Braille Day, which coincides with Louis Braille's birthday, the one who invented Braille. So speaking during the commemorations, participants noted that most teachers are not competent with Braille, making it difficult to impart knowledge to learners with special needs. And another participant who was also there said that even people in communities need to be made aware of the need for people with Braille, because they mentioned that sometimes when they're at home and they've got their Braille books, people just leave them haphazardly and they may get soaked, or they may end up throwing them away, not understanding what happens to them. And they were also mentioning that there is need for the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education to ensure that there are more books that are produced in Braille so that people can be able to, even people with visual impairment can be able to access these books. And then the founder and director of Gateway to Election, Mr. Robert Malunda, who is, which is the organization that was commemorating the day, said that currently they have trained 70 blind people within Zimbabwe. And due to COVID-19, they have been able to explore online options like training online and using platforms like Zoom, where they have managed to at least reach a few visually impaired people around Zimbabwe. So he says they are really trying to train these people on computer literacy programs and the use of a screen reader. So yeah, for these stories, if you want to read them in full, please head on to our website, www.sci.org.zw, and don't forget to follow us on our socials at SciZW. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Tanaka, for giving us the news headlines this morning. So these are the services that we provide as Site. We offer live streaming, program sponsorship, documentaries, social media posts, corporate events, photography, filming, and public relations services. You can call us on 078-713-9460 or 077-310-3262 or visit our offices at number 45 Moffat Avenue, Hillside in Bulawayo.
Well, thanks so much, Precious, for that. Also, let's jump straight into what we're serving for breakfast this morning. We're going to be joined by Professor Lapmo Maduku to unpack the Delimitation Report court case. Professor, good morning. Welcome to This Morning on Asakhe. Professor Maduku, can you hear us? Please try to unmute your mic.
Yes, I can hear you. Morning.
Talk about the Delimitation court case. Before we talk about the court case, first paint a picture for us. What is the proper procedure on how delimitation should be done in Zimbabwe, according to the Constitution of Zimbabwe and according to the Electoral Act in Zimbabwe?
The delimitation process is provided for in the Constitution. It's a very clear process. What the Constitution wants is that each of the constituencies in Zimbabwe, the Constitution sets the number of constituencies at 210. So what it wants is that each of those constituencies should approximately have equal numbers of voters. And so one has to work around the boundaries in such a way that you have the same number of registered voters in each constituency. And then where that is not possible, you then take into account other factors like the geographic features of an area, what they call community of interest, population, and so on, to just do a variation. And then you also have to take into account existing electoral boundaries. If you are delimiting constituency. So if you are delimiting constituencies, you have to start from the existing constituent boundaries, and then you move from there on the basis of registered voters. What I only have to say that in terms of the Constitution, the delimitation refers both to constituent boundaries and ward boundaries. And it is expected that there are rules that prescribe that constituencies cannot extend from one province to another. And then if it is wards or ward boundaries, a ward cannot extend from one district to another. Things like those are some of the rules. So you'll first have to deal with provincial totals. We have 10 provinces. So you know that constituents have to be restricted within the provinces. And these are the issues that have to be taken into account. So it's a technical process, but it is guided by law. And where you then end up with boundaries, you justify why you have moved in certain positions.
All right, thank you so much, Prof, for that contribution this morning. Can you hear us? All right, let's jump straight to the next. Maybe follow up for that question, for that issue that was raised on the issue of the boundaries that I was set up in Zimbabwe. But now we are taking Zach to court over this delimitation report. What are some of the things that we are raising out from this delimitation report that was taken? Zach took it to Parliament, and then Parliament went back to the president. What are some of the issues that we are raising from in this court case?
I need just to keep correcting you. I'm not sure why people in the media keep making those mistakes. I'm not taking Zach to court. I'm a lawyer of a person who is taking Zach to court. So always make that clear. We're just representing someone who is taking Zach to court. They are not actually taking Zach to court, the one I'm representing. They are taking Parliament to court, but with the center of their issues with Parliament relates to Zach. So Zach is indirectly in court. My client is simply wanting Parliament to investigate whether the delimitation report, initially it was a preliminary delimitation report, now I'm sure it has reached another level, to investigate whether that report was produced by the commission as a whole, or it was produced by just a few commissioners, in this case, the chair and the vice chair. That is the issue. And what my client wants is that Parliament must be found to have failed to perform its constitutional obligation of verifying the real origins of the report. If, of course, the Parliament is found to have breached its obligations, then the consequence would be that whatever happened was unlawful.
All right, thank you so much for that response, Professor. So my question is that since the Speaker of Parliament, Mudenda, also said that Chidawa failed to plead facts which can trigger exclusive jurisdiction of the Constitutional Court to deal with the matter, what facts are there that you can possibly lay for us to say this can possibly trigger jurisdiction?
Well, I think that we would not go into the details much. That is their defense. It doesn't mean that they are correct in saying that he didn't plead facts. We would see what happens. That was their response. It's actually an incorrect response. The only facts that trigger the exclusive jurisdiction of the Constitutional Court, in fact, the only fact is your allegation that Parliament has not done what it was supposed to do. That's enough for the Constitutional Court to start dealing with the matter. Whether the Constitutional Court then reaches a different conclusion and says, in fact, Parliament did, or Parliament did not breach any constitutional obligation, that is a different matter. But for the court to sit and hear the matter, it is enough for you to allege that Parliament failed to fulfill its constitutional obligations, which is what my client did. Chidawa did that very clearly in his papers. I think these papers are available. You all have them. I think they are online. And then the speaker's response is also available. There are enough allegations. He says that he drew Parliament's attention to a document signed by 7 commissioners. And his argument is that on any reasonable reading of that document, Parliament ought to have been quite alert to the possibility that that report may not have been a report of the whole commission.
All right, thank you so much for that, Prof. And it is also said that Chidau argues that the report was signed by 2 commissioners out of 9, and he's questioning whether ZAC is being a corporate body or it's only being represented by 2 members. Are we perhaps seeing some sort of factionalism within ZAC when it comes to this issue?
Well, I don't know about that. What I know is that Chidawa has put to the public, he has put to the court a document signed by 7 commissioners who, according to his interpretation, are distancing themselves from the report. And then, as if that is not enough or was not enough, we see that whatever final report may have been presented or revised preliminary, or whether it's a final, that was also not signed by all the commissioners. The argument we are hearing around is that it may not be necessary to sign or whatever, but that's beside the point. The fact of the matter is that the report that of things, you would sign the report. There was space actually in the report for the signatures of the commissioners. Why was that space put there when in fact there was no signature?
Thanks so much, Professor, for that response. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the delimitation report court case. Our guest this morning is Professor Labo Matuku, unpacking that court case there, what's happening and the way forward. Now, Professor, now that the report has been given to the president and ended by the Exec chairperson, is there a final document that has been given to the president, or is there any leeway to have the document reviewed because it's still in court? Oh, unfortunately, we have lost the professor there because of network. So, in the meantime, we had the professor speaking about the issue of delimitation report, what was supposed to be done procedurally. But now, my question was the issue of now that report has gone to the president, Priscilla Chikumba has handed over the report to the president. What happens now? Are we going to use that report as the final one? We have lost professor there.
Okay. Kindly be patient with us as we add him back as a speaker.
If you have any questions around the issue of delimitation report, please press the mic and then you can go out with questions to the professor. Professor, I see you are back. They were speaking about the issue of the report. Now it's going to the president. The Exec chairperson has given the report to the president. What happens from there? Are you going to review that process, or are you going to adopt that report and then that's the final document? We seem to be facing problems with network there. Professor, please do request the mic once more. I see you have Tanazani there. Tanazani, good morning. Welcome to This Morning on Asakhe.
Morning, Brighton, and good morning, everyone in the space. I had a question actually to the professor himself. As I look at the delimitation report from, should I say, from a social point of view, because to me, I'm having an argument actually as to say we are doing this delimitation based on the voters' population. But according to the census at the moment, we've got more than 2 million people who are eligible to vote, but they are not even registered to vote. So this delimitation thing goes into affecting the boundaries of the constituencies. What that means is that the resource allocation will also follow the boundaries of the constituencies. So how then do we have an equal population or an equal distribution of wealth when we have got many people are not even being counted in different constituencies. You find out that a constituency has maybe 35,000 people who are registered voters, but at the end of the day, you've got another 20,000 who are not even registered to vote, who are not even interested in voting. But those people are Zimbabweans, those people are paying tax. And then an MP is now representing more than 50,000 in a certain constituency, with some people who are not eligible to vote, with some people also who are eligible to vote but who did not register to vote. How then do we have the equitable distribution of resources? Because remember, MPs are given these monies of constituency development whatsoever, and those people, some of them they have smaller constituencies and some of them they have bigger constituencies. How do we have Zimbabweans being treated equally in all these different constituencies?
All right, thank you so much, Tandazani, for that contribution. Now the professor can respond to your question.
Well, what I hear what he's saying. I think we can deal with that. I'm not sure whether I'm also going to answer the other question before I was interrupted, where that it had been asked that the report had been submitted to the president, and then what next? If I may start on that
Yes,
very briefly. Yes. What I wanted to say is that in terms of the Constitution, once the final report is presented to the president must gazette it within 14 days. And what we have problems with at the moment is that there is a difference between the president's office and ZEC. ZEC appears to be saying that they submitted a final report, while the president's office says they have not yet received a final report. They only received what they call a revised preliminary report. So they have to resolve that factual situation. If the president has not yet received the report according to him, then he will not gazette anything within 14 days of that receipt. On the other hand, ZEC might then be waiting for the 14 days for their report to be gazetted, something that ought to be resolved quickly. So that if the president has not yet received the report, then ZEC must ensure that it delivers to him the final report. Then coming to the question relating to constituent numbers, and then the differences that generally, it is not correct that our developmental thrust is constituency or ward based. That has not been the main thrust. It's a very isolated framework to look at development on the basis of constituencies or wards. Generally, our development projects and activities for a long time have been on a devolution basis. Now we call that devolution. On a provincial base, and from a province you get to the district and thereafter to the ward. And then in doing so, you use mainly the population figures when it comes to developmental projects and to focusing on that element. But there is now a framework where some projects and development aspects are channeled through constituencies, particularly through what is called the Constituency Development Fund. That is the only project or fund that goes via constituencies. So it won't really affect much. All what has to be known is that the delimitation of constituencies is primarily a method of trying to get representatives for our representative democracy. So it's really a mechanism to ensure that we divide the country into constituencies for purpose of electing people who go to parliament or people who go to the local authorities. Once that function is achieved, delimitation need not be stretched too far. If you are the president of the country, you would know that you are for all people, whether they are registered to vote or not registered to vote, and so forth. If you need a district hospital, if you need, to deal with roads, if we need schools and so forth in areas, these have to do with the population, but the representatives in government or the representatives in parliament ought to know that although the registered population for voting purposes is 20,000, but I know that the people in this area are 58,000 adults or whatever. Then you deal with your development properly. I hope I have answered. I am saying there should not be an exaggeration of the role of delimitation in formulating development activities.
Well, thanks so much, Professor, for that response this morning. I hope, Tanazani, you answered there. But also, Professor, last month in Harare, you spoke to journalists at a media briefing, speak on behalf of Pollard as the chairperson on governance and legislative agenda. So we spoke to journalists saying you rejected this report from ZEC. According to you, say this report has failed the test as enshrined in the Constitution of Zimbabwe. So as Pollard, do you have trust in ZEC to deliver at free and fair credible elections?
At the moment, no. I think that we need to be satisfied. I'm really speaking for myself. We haven't discussed that specific question, which is too direct. So I would not say Pollard has taken a position on the current ZEC. But we took a position on the divisions that appear quite apparent. Pollard was very much concerned that ZEC appeared not to be acting as a corporate body. And I think the chairperson of ZEC, Justice Shigumba, did confirm that when she came from State House. She was saying that she was going to sort it out within a month to ensure that ZEC would be united again, which was an admission that at the time she spoke with the media, ZEC was not acting as one. Now, our worry is that she may fail in that ambition to unite the organization. If that happens, I can say with clarity that ZEC would not be in a position to carry the confidence of everyone in running the election.
Right. Thank you so much, Prof, for that response. Anzela, I see you are there as a speaker. Please do go ahead and say with the contribution this morning.
Thanks. I think my question is related to what Tandazani said. I mean, my understanding as a layman is that the reason why there's census every 10 years and there's delimitation every 10 years is that the delimitation is done basing on the population. But then if you look at how ZEC is doing it, they are using the voter population rather than the number of people that are in a particular area. Is it how it's supposed to be done that they use the voter population, which can change anytime if people increase to register? So why don't they use the voter population, I mean, the population of a particular constituency rather than the voter population?
All right, thank you so much, Zenzele, for that contribution. Prof, may you kindly respond, please?
Yes, I think Zenzele's contribution, I'm surprised. I assume that Zenzele can read and write. I mean, he's speaking very good English there. He shouldn't then say that he assumes that the limitation is based on population. Zenzele, there is the Constitution of Zimbabwe, and you can read. Just go and open Section 161 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. It's very clear. Just read it. When you read that section, it tells you what ought to be taken into account. It is that constitutional provision that says you take into account registered voters. But when you then have to look at the variance, because it must be equal number of registered voters, but you are allowed to vary up to 20%. It is only and only when you are justifying a variation from the equality principle that you take into account population, you take into account existing boundaries, you take into account the other issues. The Constitution does not actually say you must vary the numbers. It says you must ensure that they are equal. But where that is impossible, you can vary up to 20%, but you must justify
that variance, and so forth. So
I think I answered you, Zenzel. I really am making this point right from the bottom of my heart, and I'm experiencing it every time I come on Twitter Spaces. We should always look at the Constitution whenever we deal with public affairs. Like in this case, delimitation is governed by a specific section of the Constitution. Let's look at it. When we go to when should elections be held, again, there are specific sections of the Constitution. Many of the sections in the Constitution do not require a lawyer for their interpretation. So I would encourage Zimbabweans to adopt the same approach that they take to the Bible. Most of them don't wait for their pastors to interpret it. They read it at home and sometimes read it on their own, and they even have their own interpretation. They can even be better preachers. That's what should happen with the Constitution.
Well, thank you so much, Prof, for that response. Angela, do you have a follow-up question, or we take more hands? If you guys just joining us this morning, we're talking to Professor Lapho Matuka, unpacking the Delimitation Report court case. If you have any questions or comments, please do request the mic. We're going to give you the mic, and then you can ask your questions. Angela, do you have any follow-up?
I'll give others a chance.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay. Your hand is up. Please do go ahead with the follow-up question that we had, and then we can take more hands.
Thank you very much. I think Professor is trying to be more academic about the thing of the delimitation process and how we are bringing it to his attention. However, let me be more specific. It's not about not understanding the Constitution. We actually understand what the Constitution says. But what we're doing here, we're challenging the very same Constitution. And we are saying that instead of using the voter population, why can't we have a constitution allowing us to use the population of the people, whether they are registered to vote or not? So this is a challenge to the constitution and all these constitutional experts. We are not saying that we don't understand what the constitution says about that. However, there is a rising question which when you're talking about Pollard and commenting on the issues that have to do with the ZEC, I find it very strange, and I would love to ask a question before I tender my challenge to the Pollard as well. But I just want to have a question. What have you guys done as Pollard for the past 5 years? Because basically I don't know what you've done. What I know is that you have yet vehicles that are coming from the taxpayers' money. That's the only thing I know. Can you please put me in the picture, Professor, what you have done for the people of Zimbabwe as Pollard, and what are you expecting to do to basically help in holding the government to account, in holding the parliament itself to account, in holding all these public institutions to account as the political players who are having something called Pollard? Because according to my own understanding, you guys have done nothing. And if you have done something, please challenge me and tell me what you have done. However, I'm also putting a challenge to the Constitution. Can we do these boundaries based on the population of the people of Zimbabwe, not based on the population of the people who are interested to vote? Some of us, we don't even want to vote. So it's not by force to vote. Therefore, there should not be some exclusion around that. Let the people let the constituencies, the boundaries be done based on the population of the people who are residing in certain areas, regardless of whether they are registered to vote or not.
Professor, you can go ahead and respond.
Yes. Thank you, Tandazan. Two aspects there that I pick and I will answer them. The first one, I have understood you correctly to be saying that you're actually raising issues which must lead to some change to the Constitution, so that you perfectly understand what it says, but you realize that the Constitution has so many problems, it is imperfect in your view, and so forth. I think if I, Love Momaduku, has any history, if I have any history at all, it is my history of opposing the current Constitution. It is my history of leading the struggle against the old constitution and even against this constitution. 2000, I led the no vote. 2013, led the no vote, but got just about 5.5% of the people. I am a very clear person when it comes to the constitution. It is totally imperfect. The criticisms you are raising now relating to delimitation, if you go to the archives, you will see that those are the very same points that we raised when we urged for a no vote. Most of my students are aware that they followed this. Each time an issue arises in the public about a criticism, they will realize that you go back to our documents in 2013, you see that those are the issues that we raised, many of them. But then I am always given a role, a dual role, when they call me to platforms and then speak about, I teach constitutional law, they sometimes describe me as a constitutional expert. There I look at the Constitution as it is. And when I interpret it and say this is what it says, that has nothing to do with whether I think that is good or bad. I'll just be saying this is what the Constitution says. So when you, Tandazani's first point, you are perfectly in order, you are with me, and you have me, count on me, if you are in the field of wanting now to see a better constitution for this country. So that is my answer to your first portion. And then coming to the second one, yes, I appreciate your criticism of Pollard, what we have been doing in the past 5 years. We have done lots of things. But I need to clarify the role of Pollard. Pollard is not there to, as Pollard, is not an institution like Parliament that brings government to account. Pollard is an institution that is supposed to promote political dialogue, which is supposed to be a channel of ideas coming from political groups, opposition groups to the government. And then in the process, the accountability of making government to account is to say, look, this is what we think will happen. I think you're not doing it properly here and there. So we have put in a lot of ideas relating to the economy, relating to reform, and government has not taken on board most of the things. I think out of the things that we have put across, I would say that we have not gone beyond 20% of the discussions there. So 80% has not been taken on board, but the 20% that has been taken on board has been useful. In fact, very useful.
All right. Thank you so much for that contribution, Professor. For now, we are going to take a question from Magneto.
All right. Thank you. Good morning. Professor Matuko, myself, I just want maybe a bit of clarification. I understand our constitution says a winning president picks his cabinet from winning MPs. But if you look in 2018, we had presidential candidates, about 23, and some of them had no single MP. They fielded themselves. It was only one person like Brian Muteki. He had no MPs. Say Brian Muteki had won in 2018. Whom was he going to pick as his cabinet ministers? Where was he going to get his cabinet ministers? Maybe it's me who doesn't understand the Zimbabwean constitution. May you clarify there? Because if the constitution says that, why then are we allowing people to stand for as presidential candidates when they don't have MPs? Because will it be a case whereby Brian Muteki wins, then he picks ZANU-PF MPs as his cabinet ministers? Can you clarify on that? And maybe I understand maybe your party as well, 2018, maybe you might have fielded some MPs, but not enough to constitute a cabinet. Say you had one, how are you going to pick your cabinet? You had one as president, how are you going to pick your cabinet without MPs? May you clarify on that, what the constitution says and what it is? Thank you.
Professor, you may go ahead and respond.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I hear the question. It's a very important one in the sense that it's clear. The constitution is very, very clear there. When it says the president picks ministers from MPs, it doesn't say that you pick ministers from your party as MPs. you just have, once a person is elected a member of parliament, they become a member of parliament. Their party affiliation is not regarded as an issue by the constitution itself. So you can have a president who has no single MP of their party, or you can have a president who is an independent, because the constitution allows independents to run for president. If they win, they are supposed to pick from parliament. Now the constitution allows you to pick up to up to seven from outside parliament. At the time we had elections in 2018, it was allowing up to 5. So I would assume that you can pick 5 ministers from outside. Now you can pick 7 ministers from outside, and then you pick the rest from inside. The other point, the question I need to understand is that there is no minimum number of cabinet ministers. So there is no law that says you cannot have a cabinet of 5 or 7 ministers. So you can have a government of 7 ministers. Now that the constitution says you can pick up to 7 from outside parliament. Now, please, it should be known that once a person is in parliament, they are a Zimbabwean. And I think that politics allows people to work across the divide. If by political decisions of the people, you are placed together, opposition MPs in the majority and the president in the minority, you have to force yourself to work together for 5 years.
Well, thanks so much, Professor, for that response this morning. Njabolo, I see you now speak up. Please do go ahead with the question.
Thank you so much, Brighton. To me, maybe to just pass a thought to the professor, because when we look at the liberation struggle, the reason why it was fought for was for equality as for us as Black people. But if we are going to base our representation based on who is registered to vote, is it not defeating the whole purpose of the liberation struggle, that others could be represented as Zimbabwean because they are registered to vote versus those that are not registered to vote? So now it's like we are segregating people according to their status, whether they are registered to vote or not registered to vote. Is it not supposed to be in a independent Zimbabwe that we have equal representation regardless of that these people are registered to vote or not registered to vote? Because I feel so much that if we are doing the delimitation processes, we are just saying, no, those that are not registered to vote, they are not equal citizens. We cannot represent them equally as we represent those that are registered to vote. Is this what we are saying in an independent Zimbabwe? Because it doesn't change the population that needs to be represented. It doesn't change how many people live in a certain area because they are not registered to vote. So that's my contribution. So I don't know. Maybe it's defeating the purpose of the liberation struggle, because we need people to be equally represented in parliament, regardless of their status to vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Njabulo, for that contribution. Professor, kindly respond to those questions. Hello, Professor, are you there? So whilst we are waiting for the professor to join us again, he might be experiencing network problems. We are going to be taking more people.
Hello, oh sorry, I'm there. Are you hearing me?
Yes, you're audible, Professor. Go ahead.
Yes, I was saying it's an interesting question. It was more like what Tandazan had indicated. What he is saying points to constitutional reform, and you are preaching to the converted. Now, what's important is for me to tell the questioner and all others that it's not always the case that you do delimitation every 10 years like we have done. In other countries with
We can't hear the professor now. Unfortunately, we can't hear the professor now. Let's try one more time with Champ. Champ, I see you now, a speaker.
constituents' boundaries. They fix them. At a particular stage in history. And
Unfortunately, we have lost the professor there. Maybe due to network. I see we have Champion John. Please do go ahead to the contribution this morning.
How are you, everyone? I just wanted to ask you kuti vamadhuku ava vane nyaya dzavakamboita dzakaita kuti ivo vablackmailwe, ko vava kuzomirira vanhu sei ivo vachiziva nyaya dzavakamboita? Ndo chinhu chokutanga. Imwe nyaya ndeyekuti ivo vari kutaura nyaya yePollard, handitika vachitaura nyaya dzavo dzePollard, isi tiri kuziva kuti Pollard yakafanana namamvemve. Saka ngavatipe masiriasi, because dzimwe dzenguva, yes of course tine tiri paspesi pamwe tichidi tiripo tichiterera, but inini ndoona sokuti hazvitipi mukana wokuti tifare kuti tinorepresentwa nomunhu usina chaanorepresenta, otaura kuti ndiri kuPollard iye asina kana svosve raakambomiririra. Kana musi umwe basa nderokutopiwa mota vachidya mari, isu vanhu vacho tichitambura tiri semataxpayer. Handifungi kuti deno vamadhuku vanga vari serious, vanoita zvavari kuita izvi, havasiri serious kuti vatibatsire somumiririri zvachose. Why ndichidaro? Because problem inoitika ndeyekuti tiri kuziva kuti Pollard, according to the constitution, hakuna chinhu chinonzi Pollard zvachose. Saka zvePollard izvi handifungi kuti tingaramba tichiteerera. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Champion John, for that contribution this morning. Professor, do you want to respond to what Champion John spoke about?
I think just I missed a bit of it. I think it was my network. I know that he was saying the last portion I heard, the Equity Pollard, we shouldn't be listening to it.
Yes, he was saying on the issue of Pollard is not part of the constitution of Zimbabwe. So why are we listening to you speaking about the issue of the constitution of Zimbabwe when yet Pollard is not part of the constitution? You want to respond to that, Professor?
Yes, I should respond to it. I think he's mixing up issues. I am on the platform today discussing delimitation, and I'm doing the discussion on the basis of my knowledge of what those processes are and what the constitution is. Then I appreciate that on Pollard, there are different views, and there are others who think that the Pollard process ought not have happened, and I respect that position. It's only that we've had differences of opinion as Zimbabweans. When I speak about Pollard, I really believe, and I would support the point that we must keep dialogue among political players. It may be unfortunate that in this current phase of Pollard, the bigger opposition parties did not join the Pollard. But things might change after the next election when you see that some people from the opposition may all agree that there is need for a dialogue platform. Some of these people that are criticizing Pollard now, I might find that they might then start supporting it. So people must separate their dislike of the politicians who are in Pollard from the whole concept of dialogue. I think we should all embrace political dialogue.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Love Momadugu, for those contributions. If there's anyone who is in the audience who would like to ask, kindly request for the mic and go ahead. So, Tendai Marombedza, go on.
Thank you very much, host. I just want to second the Professor Maduku, for what he just said now, that today's topic is delimitation report court case. I think Professor is right in the sense that Professor started explaining about Pollard and stuff because there is one of the audiences who asked about it. But I don't think it's necessary for us today to be like mixing issues. We just want to know about the delimitation. And also, to second the prof also on the issue of dialogues. Like I attended also another space of Professor Maduku and Professor Moyo, and they said we love platforms like this because they bring us together regardless of what political party do you support. So if you come to a dialogue like this, we don't want to come here with feelings of me, I'm supporting CCC, me, I'm supporting ZANU PF, or Professor Maduku is supporting his own party. We don't want that. We want to have a dialogue where we discuss and share ideas and also make others to understand what does it mean when we talk of delimitation, something like that. So that's my contribution. I just want to say Professor is very right that we should not mix the topics. Let's talk about delimitation report. Then we maybe we can agree to talk about the Pollard its effectiveness also for another day. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Tendai, for that contribution this morning. If you're just joining us, we're talking about Delimitation report, our court case. Our guest this morning is Professor Lamo Maduku. So let me take one more last speaker before we wrap up the show, Professor. One more last speaker. We have a question or contribution. Lord, I see you there. You have the mic. Please do go ahead with a question or contribution this morning.
Good morning. I just have a quick question to the professor. I think we saw the response by Zach. We've seen the hard work that they have put in to make sure that things go well in the harmonized elections. Don't you think, or do you think that people are disputing to the report are scared to lose to ZANU PF in 2023? Or what's your take?
Professor, you can go ahead and respond.
Well, I think there is a mistake there. The question, I think, that the people who are complaining are mainly those who are against ZANU or outside ZANU. The reality on the ground is that there is more opposition to the delimitation report from ZANU PF than from other people. So the opposition to the delimitation report or the criticism you have seen is really across the political divide, and in fact more from ZANU. Remember that ZANU PF has 2/3 majority in parliament.
If you read the ad hoc committee report, the parliamentary ad hoc committee report, which was then endorsed by the whole parliament, you will find that
there is opposition to it. I hope the listener is there. If Parliament adopts a report now, it's ZANU PF speaking, because Parliament is 2/3 ZANU PF. The Speaker of Parliament, Mudenda, is ZANU PF. He's the one who handed over that document to the President and criticized the report. The President isn't there. So you must be, I think, be very clear that if there is a group that is ahead of everyone in opposing the delimitation report, that group is ZANU PF.
Well, thank you so much, Professor, for that response this morning. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the delimitation report. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our show this morning. Before we let Professor go, Professor, I wanted to find out what's the way forward in terms of this report now that has been given to Parliament, went back to the President, went back to ZEC. What's the way forward now, and what can you expect from this court case that you are spearheading and also leading in terms of your client, representing your client?
Well, in terms of the report, we expect that there will still be exchange between ZEC and the President for them to then finally gazette the report. I think the indications which say that the President has only received a revised preliminary draft shows that there are still issues between the President and ZEC. So I'm not expecting a very easy resolution of the matter. I think that might take more time than we thought. Then coming to the court case that my client has taken to the Constitutional Court, we are very hopeful that the court will understand our point and then possibly give us the order that we are seeking. If we win in court, then it means the delimitation process effectively would have to be somewhat redone.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Love Momaduku, for joining us on today's episode of This Morning on Asakhe. We were discussing the delimitation report court case. And if you had not been able to follow up with the conversation, you can still listen on our Twitter page at SiteZW.
Yeah, do follow us at SiteZW, and tomorrow we're going to be back again with more insightful, informative conversation as we try to unpack the political landscape in Zimbabwe as we head for elections. For me, Brighton Ngube and Gracious Kiati, is bye for now. Do enjoy the rest of your day.